like to present to you this pin, which symbolizes your membership as one of our Filipino.
Proud to stand with this announcement, and this is something I can live with as a community worker, and I can champion and advocate and say that this government, the government of Canada, is truly a compassionate, a just society that opens its doors to thousands upon thousands of newcomers and are calling this nation this new home. And Minister Kenney, the Pearl of the Orient is for you to remember. I want you to put that on your table. I want you to look at that symbol, because thousands upon thousands of Filipino women depend on you to make sure that they are adequately protected, their wages are fair, their working conditions are fair, but most importantly, they will truly find a home here in Canada to which they can transition into a better life. Now the challenge is ahead of us. Obviously, this is not going to change everything overnight. There's a lot of work that needed to be done, and I would encourage as many of you who are community workers and the settlement agencies like my colleague in here, the Kababayan Center, help them settle and transition properly so that more access to programs under the settlement agencies that are offering all kinds of programs for them so that they could properly settle in this country and become more productive for our country, Canada. So thank you once again.
It is really a surprising announcement, and it will really help our newcomers, especially the caregivers, the families of the caregivers. And I hope that we will be able to really implement this. Especially, you know, one of my signature in the proposal is about the employers. They should have this sign the agreement that they have these moral and legal obligations to the caregivers. And I think it is there, and they had the law. So I'm really moved, and I cannot, we really thank you. And yeah.
Resource Center will say, touching lives one life at a time. Today it's no longer touching lives one life at a time. You have saved all the caregivers and their families from pain and suffering. I'm sorry. All of you, I thank you. You know who you are, all of you.
Questions that, you know, this announcement doesn't solve all of the problems. And there will always be caregivers who need our help. But what we are doing today with these new rules is to create a better, much stronger legal framework to protect their rights. They'll still need you as advocates. They'll still need the settlement organizations. They'll still need the support from the church and the families. But the message here today is the government is on their side. And we will be there fighting for you to make sure that this program works, that it provides the care that Canadians need, and that the hope and opportunity for... We want to make sure that the program continues, and that means employers need to know that their interests will be reasonably assessed as well. We're not saying that all employers or most employers are going on a blacklist. We're saying that those who are clearly in violation of the basic labor market, labor code protections, will not be able to access temporary foreign workers in the future. And I think that's entirely reasonable. They will also have to bear a higher share of the costs to bring caregivers to Canada. We think that's reasonable. And in exchange, we hope and expect that caregivers will be faithful to good employers, that they won't leave right away. And we had to strike that balance between, to keep the program going, between the interests of the employer, the families, and the caregivers. And I think we've done the right balance here. In terms of the precise guidelines. Those are up to each province to define in their provincial labor codes. They are responsible for labor market regulation. And what we've done in these new regulations is to work with the provinces. So when they report to us that employer X is clearly violating the conditions of the contract in terms of working conditions or living conditions or working hours, then we'll say, that's it, we're getting that caregiver a new work permit and within 3 weeks, and we are not allowing that employer to have access to caregivers in the future.
Mr. Kenney, Brandon is seeking immediate landed immigrant status, and that wasn't granted here. Can you explain why that?
Sure, I give it, that certainly was a recommendation from some, and I give it very serious consideration. Ultimately, I concluded on the advice of my officials and speaking to many people in our consultations that would spell the end of the program. The Living Caregiver Program is a part of the Temporary Foreign Worker Program, which means it moves much more quickly. It takes 5 or 6 years for applicants for permanent residency to come to Canada through, for instance, the Federal Skilled Worker Program. Now, whereas it takes typically a few months or a year or less for living caregivers or temporary foreign workers to come to Canada, so it moves much more quickly. If we were to treat people as permanent residents, it would, to maintain fairness in the permanent resident part of our immigration program, we'd have to put them in the back of the line and wait for 5 years. And also, this is a very unique program. This is the only program that allows what the regulations characterize as low-skilled temporary foreign workers, a pathway to permanent residency. And I want to keep that pathway open. And now we've made it easier to get down that path to permanent residency with the calculation by hours. The reason, I think the main reason why people advocated for that, and I think it was unrealistic, is because they wanted to make sure that caregivers would be able to leave abusive situations if they needed to. And we've made that possible now. Now they can get a replacement work permit at a new employer within 3 weeks. They're much more protected. The final thing is, if we were to make people immediate permanent residents, we have no idea. They could come and end up working or not working. They could work in a different field. There would no longer be a living caregiver program. It would just be a different fast-track, unfair stream of permanent residency, unfair to everyone else waiting in the Federal Skilled Worker Program. But once they got here, let's say they did go into a living caregiver situation, and they moved around, we would be unable to know who they're signing contracts with. The only way we can know who the employer is and monitor their conduct and sanction them if they don't comply with the terms of the contract is by issuing these work permits. And if someone becomes an immediate permanent residence, they don't need the work permits. So the whole idea of immediate permanent residency for a whole lot of reasons simply didn't make sense. As I said at the outset, I wanted to mend the program, not prepared to do the job. And right now, Canadians are prepared to apply for out-of-home caregiver positions, but not in-home. So that's the logic of the whole program. And I don't want to shut it down. I know there are some in the community, some in the labor union movement, and some of my friends that would like to do that. That would like to say, you know, we're going to turn this into something other than what it is. Well, that would shut the door to many of these women who would not be able to get to Canada otherwise, either through permanent resident streams or as temporary foreign workers. And I don't want to close the door on the opportunity for permanent residency for tens of thousands. And by the way, do you know that the Philippines has become the #1 source country for immigration to Canada if you include both permanent and temporary streams? That is in large part because of the women who are coming through this program.